Hey everyone, welcome to our next PSP Roundtable. My name is Chris McCoy, and I'm the Vice President of Membership Development for Phi Sigma Pi. And I'm really excited to be with everyone tonight, along with our great panel. I'll have them introduce themselves in here just a few minutes. But we wanted to have this roundtable tonight because we know a lot of our chapters around the country have either just had pinning. We saw a lot of great pictures on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram of your awesome initiate classes, so congratulations on all your recruitment successes. Some chapters, like I said, just did pinning. We have some chapters currently that are in the middle of their initiation process, and then we have maybe a few chapters that are right there on the tail end and preparing for induction really soon. So with that comes a lot of questions regarding initiate voting and giving feedback to our initiates. If you recall, this summer at Grand Chapter, the Grand Chapter discussed an amendment to the National Constitution and approved that amendment, saying that, and I'll kind of read it, it's in Section 5, Recruitment and Initiation Requirements. And it says, ensure each initiate is provided feedback in person at least once on the initiate's progress on the requirements of the chapter initiation program. So with that coming back is talking about this mid-semester feedback process that we have, where we're encouraging and we want our chapters to make sure that they're meeting with their initiates and giving them in-person feedback at least midway through the initiation process, so that way if there's any issues, we can address that, but also the positive sides too, where we can tell our initiates how great they are and how excited we are to have them as brothers. So before we jump right in, I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll start with questions. And like always, you can follow us along on Twitter using the hashtag PSP Roundtable. Awesome. So I'm going to turn it over to our first panelist, and she's going to introduce herself.
All right, hi guys. I'm Emma Vincent. I'm the initiate advisor at Gamma Mu, which is Michigan State, or oh my gosh, Central Michigan University. I'm a junior, and I'm studying communication disorders to become a speech and language pathologist. What I love about PSP, there's so many different things, but one of the biggest things was I was an athlete in high school, and I loved that team aspect, and that team aspect and that family away from home that I had missed so much when I am at school. So.
Awesome. Hello, brothers. My name is Christiana Berardi. I am a Phi Sigma Pi chapter consultant. So I'm sure many of you recognize and know me, but for those who don't, I kind of manage this, like to call it like a diamond region of the country, so anywhere between the middle of the East Coast up to where Emma is in Michigan, down to Colorado, down to Texas, and back up. So hello to anyone who is unfamiliar with me, and I look forward to meeting you all hopefully at National Convention this summer. Yeah, I'm so thrilled to be on this roundtable, and thank you, Chris, for inviting me and having me. Like Emma said, I played a lot of competitive sports as well. I danced. I was involved in everything. So, going to William & Mary, I really wanted to be a part of something that was bigger and continue to do so. So I joined as a junior, and I felt that my time was too short. So here I am on the national staff, kind of, giving back in any way that I can. I guess a little background on me. I am a Gamma Psi alumna, so I did my undergraduate coursework at the College of William & Mary. It's a cute little university, a lot smaller than where Emma goes to school. But yeah, I'm just very excited to be with you tonight and can't wait to talk a little bit more about mid-review.
Great. And like I said before, my name is Chris McCoy, and I currently serve as the Vice President of Membership Development on the National Council. That position is the position most commonly referred to as the one that helps ensure initiation practices are taught and disseminated amongst our brotherhood. I'm an initiate of the Gamma Beta chapter at Morehead State University in Morehead, Kentucky. That's where I graduated with my bachelor's, and I did my master's degree in adult and higher education. I currently work in the Office of Admissions at the University of South Carolina, so shout out to Alpha Upsilon chapter out there. So before we start, again, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's tuning in or is going to watch on YouTube afterwards. I know some schools are on spring break right now, or maybe you're hurrying to get your National Constitution amendments submitted quickly, so I appreciate y'all taking your time. Again, If you have questions, we're going to try to answer as many as possible. You can send those to us by Twitter. The hashtag is PSP Roundtable. If you're watching us on Google+, there's a question and answer tablet you can type in as well. So we're just going to kind of kick it off very broadly. If we can kind of talk about what are some ways that we can communicate the requirements to initiates?
Yeah, Chris, so this is a great question, and one that as a chapter consultant and working with several chapters, I get asked this question a lot as well, and I really feel like it stems all the way back to the recruitment period. So just making sure that at information sessions and at meet nights, you're giving them a little bit of an idea of what the initiation process looks like and also what it's like to be a brother. Some chapters that I have had these discussions with have mentioned that they have a pre-pinning meeting. So before entering into the initiation program, they get everybody together and celebrate the recruitment time and also let them know a little bit about what the next couple weeks will look like. I know one thing that Emma will be able to fill you in on a little bit more is initiation handbooks and how helpful those are just for the continuation throughout that program. She's been working really hard on her, so I won't take away her thunder, but I'll let her talk a little bit about that as well.
So like Christiana said, we do at Gamma Mu, we have books that we give out to our initiates when they get pinned that their bigs make for them. So they're just kind of like little scrapbooks. I have one that I had made before. And they just have information about our chapter and different things that are good for their quizzes and exams. And then in the back, we put in our handbook that we make for the initiates, just describing our whole process and what they can expect from the process, what to gain, what they're going to gain, what they're going to learn, but also all of the requirements that we have, like dialogue requirements and their quizzes that they have to pass, and all of the class meetings and their different events and projects they have to put on. And so it's just a really good educational thing for them to look through, and kind of like a syllabus you get in a class that has a lot of information for quizzes and exams later in the semester as well. So that's how a big way we get our information out. Also at our meet nights, we put it in our PowerPoints. We let them know at class meetings, and just lots of constant reminders of different ways that they can, of reminders of what they need to do.
Awesome, and I think you guys both bring a very central point that it's so important to make it clear what the requirements are and have that. So whether that's having the pre-pinning meeting with the initiates or having a binder or some sort of handbook prepared in front of you, it's crucial. I think as college students, if you go into a class and all of a sudden during finals week you finally realize what the grading scale was or how your grade was going to be assessed, you'd be upset if you made it through the entire semester and no one told you how you're going to be assessed for that class. So the same thing with Phi Sigma Pi. I think during the recruitment stage we attract a high caliber of student. So we have some of the top students on our campus, and their expectations are going to be very, very high. And this idea of being a professional fraternity and presenting ourselves as such. So making those requirements very clear from the beginning, so crucial. Great point. So let's say we've made those requirements very clear from the beginning. We've set our expectations, and maybe a couple weeks in, we're noticing that there's some initiatives that are falling short of our stated expectations or not meeting requirements. What are some ways that you've seen or that maybe your chapter does in approaching that problem with that initiate?
Oh, I'll let Emma go first.
Oh, okay. We just have, we'll have like the initiate advisor talk to the big if they're not aware of the issue already, and have them first try and address the problem with their little, and see if there's something they can help them study. They can go to events with them, do things, help them schedule dialogues if they need help scheduling them. But it's also something, if it needs to be addressed, that I would say is definitely in my duties to do as well. And I think if you had a meeting, I would have the big and the initiate advisor there. If the big wasn't available, I know I would invite my chapter liaison to come as well. I think it's just important to have two people at the meeting to bounce off of each other if you're not sure what to say. But, yeah.
Yeah, so similar to what Emma said, I would definitely recommend inviting the brothers that know the initiate best. So whether that be the big, the initiate advisor, the little. For those of you who are new to the term chapter liaison, Gamma Mu uses that as brother at large. That's their terminology for the same position. So that's also something too. The most important thing is you want to make sure that it's not an attack on the initiate. So inviting too many people may make them feel like they're being ambushed or personally targeted. So keeping it to those who know the initiate best, I think will really help. Emma and I were actually chatting earlier today about some great ways that I've heard from other chapters about how they handle this same process and how they handle talking to initiates with concerns. And some great ways that I've heard are, I know from one chapter, they give each initiate both an area of strength and an area for improvement, so that if there is a concern with one initiate out of 25 and they go back to their class and say, oh, did they ask you to improve in anywhere, and they're like, no, that initiate doesn't feel like, oh, like I feel singled out now. So they give each initiate both a strength and an area for improvement. And one thing that I learned with my my background in psychology too is that typically we as humans like to hear 3 pieces of positive feedback before we hear one piece of negative feedback. So the way I was explaining it to Emma earlier is saying like, wow, oh my gosh, I see that you have passed all your quizzes, and you've really gone out of your way to go to some brother events as well as initiate events, and wow, you're 80% of the way through your dialogues. One thing that you could do, since you've gotten so many done, is let's say try and spend a little bit more time on your dialogues, so that brothers don't think you're just answering all those questions and then heading out of there. Maybe spend some more time getting to know brothers. And maybe that was a concern that was brought forward too. Maybe you have someone who is just like getting their quick signatures and brothers are rubbed the wrong way. Trying to frame the issue in the best way possible so that it's a productive discussion rather than something that could easily be perceived as like an attack or an ambush.
Absolutely. I think those are great points that you guys bring up, and just kind of review kind of what was said is it's essential that sometimes those conversations are awkward, right? I remember I served as the initiative advisor as an undergrad, and unfortunately there came a time where the chapter had to part ways with initiates, and they were close friends of mine, and it's always hard to separate that time of like, okay, yes, I'm your friend. I'll be your friend outside of Phi Sigma Pi. However, at this time, it's not working, and we have to have that conversation. And understandably, it is a horribly awkward conversation. I'm a firm believer that as a leader, if you're serving as IA or just even in your chapter, even if you don't have a position, you're probably in Phi Sigma Pi because you want to be a leader. And leaders sometimes grow out of those awkward conversations, and you sometimes have to embrace the awkward and the uncomfortable to grow. And not only will you grow, but that person's going to grow too. So if you think of it from a professional standpoint, after we graduate, we're all going to have reviews with our bosses, and our bosses are going to tell us things that we're doing great, and they're also going to give us feedback on ways that we can improve. So this is good professional practice as well. Highlights again, focus on the positives first. I think that's always great to have that conversation, and it's all about how you frame the conversation too. So if you call in a meeting and it's a one-on-one meeting and you're on one side of the table and you have an initiate cell on the other side of the table, it automatically is going to create some defensiveness from both parts. So if you can involve your brother at large or they're big, just having someone else there, it adds comfort to you, but especially having someone the initiate knows adds comfort to them as well. The last part of it is that it kind of protects everyone involved too. So that way there's another third party that understands how the conversation went and what was covered. So that way you don't find yourself in more of a he said versus she said situation. So those are great. If you're struggling on campus about having these conversations, I think faculty advisors are a great resource to go to. Your chapter consultants are an amazing resource to use, so definitely go to them. If for some reason you find yourself that I have to have this conversation, I don't know, I can't get a hold of anyone, reach out to your campus. Your campus might have an ONSPUDS office. That's an office that helps students with conflict management, and they can help you prep for that conversation and almost help you write a script and talking points. You can reach out to your student government as well as your student activities office. All these resources are on your campus that can help you do this, that you have to have that. And, again, it's having that conversation and saying, where are we at, and kind of doing that evaluation. Do you guys have any other tips for having difficult conversations?
I would just say, too, the way you end the meeting is important as well. So not leaving it off with, hey, these are 3 things you did well, this is something you should improve on, but also saying, hey, how can we help you achieve this goal? Like if you only have 20% of your interviews in, are you finding it difficult to communicate with brothers? Is there a way that we can get brothers to reach out to you more frequently? And just also having a conversation and letting them know, like, we're on your side. Like, you're in this initiate program to, like, grow and learn and flourish, and we want you to succeed. I think that is, another important part to note.
Yeah, going along with that, I always try and connect it back to the characteristics of an ideal brother. So I say things like, we want to tell you this now so that you can grow and learn and change, and all those other good ones that we have on there. I try and connect back into the meeting.
Great. Yeah, you definitely want to have some sort of end game in mind with the conversation, and leave with some sort of deliverable action, whether that's separating or getting feedback from the initiate. Right now we're kind of focusing on how you tell the initiate maybe they're not upholding some responsibilities, but on the same side is we need to go into that conversation, understand that the initiate may want to give us feedback on how we are doing as a chapter too. And expectations and requirements is a vital two-way street. So during recruitment, or even when we're doing those pre-pinning meetings, if we make expectations of the initiates, we have to deliver on that too. So again, very vital. So great suggestions. So at this point, I'm going to check in to see, do we have any questions on Twitter so far that A1 would like to ask? Awesome. So Twitter's a little bit quiet right now, which is totally fine. But like I said, if you have any questions, you can tweet them at us at hashtag PSP Roundtable, or you can just type them into the question and answer box here on Google+, and we'll try to answer them. You can also keep the conversation going after this, or if you have something to add that we're talking about, definitely too. So kind of going back on the requirements and evaluation of initiates, I think one thing we saw this academic year is chapters utilizing what's called an initiate review sheet. It's a sheet some chapters are making where they're coming up with a list of questions that they're asking the initiate to review themselves and do some self-reflection prior. And then after they have that, then they have the conversation and give the initiate feedback. So by doing that, we're letting the initiate review themselves first and then receiving feedback from us. So I just want to kind of turn it over to the panel. If you can share any examples of good questions either you've seen on an initiate review sheet or good questions that you think would be important to have if your chapter wanted to utilize this.
Yeah, Chris, so that's a great point. I will say that this, even the mid-review process is really new. So initiate review sheets are new but are becoming increasingly more popular all over, just with chapters that I work with, as well as, Jen, Jessica, and Robbie. I think, I haven't seen one yet, but I think if I was creating one, some things that I would like to see are just, what their favorite part of the program is, how they feel like they're doing, just generally, what's a challenge that they've had, and then maybe, be more critical about us as well. So, strengths of our program or areas that they would like to see improved. I think that, evaluating themselves as well as the program that they're in may help. Maybe something also that you leave for after the initiation program, at least the criticism of the program in general, let them get all the way through before you do that. But yeah, Emma, I'm sure you have some ideas on this as well, so really cool idea.
Yeah, a lot of the questions you said we have on ours. We have questions asking even how they see themselves fitting in with the chapter now that we've all gotten to know each other better, making sure that they feel like they're comfortable and that they are part of our brotherhood. We ask questions how their relationship with their big is, how they think the IA is doing, if they're having any issues with brothers or even with initiates. And we also ask like if they have any like tips about what they'd like to see in the future for the process or even different parts of our chapter, like if they have really great ideas for fundraising or things like that. And then we always try and end it with making sure that if they have any questions or concerns, we're addressing those as well. So that's usually our ending question. But yeah.
Great. Those are all some great suggestions. And if you missed any of those, just remember that this roundtable, we're going to be broadcasting it on the YouTube channel for the National Fraternity, so you can always go back and catch those. Well, I would add, the review sheet is great. Especially if you're doing it around the mid-semester point, because you can use that for the initiate to self-reflect. But also, if you think about it as teaching a college course myself, I use a mid-semester review of the class and let students give me a course evaluation. So if you want to add those, some of the questions I ask is like, what am I doing right now that helps you learn best? What's happening in the class that maybe is an obstacle to your learning? And that way they can give me feedback on how I'm teaching. So that way I know in my class right now I have a lot of visual learners. So I know every week I need to make sure that my presentations have a lot of visual elements to those. And if I just come in and do a straight lecture out of a book, they're not going to get it as much. So looking at the learning styles of the initiate is vital and gain that feedback. And it's good to have that self-reflection time as well. I know we referenced professionalism at the beginning and getting feedback from your boss, and one thing that you'll probably find most of you when you get a job after graduation is before your review is your employer's probably going to ask you to do some self-reflection and feedback and look at like, how am I doing? Am I meeting my goals? And so it all comes back to, again, that not only are we preparing these members for membership into Phi Sigma Pi, but we're preparing them for their membership within, as citizens in society afterwards. So it's a great purpose to have. So a lot of chapters this year, let's say it's your chapter's first time that you've ever done a mid-semester feedback, and you're really nervous about it. Up to the panel, what kind of advice would you give to a chapter, especially a first-time IA who's going through this process for the very first time?
Yeah, so I think it can be intimidating for sure. I know a lot of chapters are still even working to structure their program in a way that fits their needs best. I do have a couple chapters who have been, practicing a mid-review just, for 3-4 years now and are still adjusting it. I would say try and just make it relaxed as possible. You want it to be comfortable for the initiate, but also comfortable for yourself. And if you're anxious, they're definitely going to feed off of that. And I think having, at least, maybe the brother at large or the big and the little, make it more of a conversation. Like we mentioned earlier, you don't want it to feel like an attack or an ambush. So I think maybe even just bringing the checklist of requirements, having the initiate bring their initiate review sheet, and this way you at least have some concrete things in front of you that you can glance over. I'm sure Emma, I never got to be initiate advisor. My chapter did calendar year elections, and I joined as a second semester junior, so I never got to serve on the e-board, and it was super disappointing, but initiate advisor was like the one thing that I really, really wanted to do. But I'm sure Emma can give a more personal aspect to like how that's been and how those conversations usually go.
I would say a lot of the same things as you. Keep it positive. We're all awkward people, but it doesn't, like, a situation doesn't have to be awkward. And a big thing that I try, that I'm like telling the people who are shadowing me Fry is our brother status isn't something to hang over the initiate's head, and it's not something that we want to make them feel like they are below us or anything. So it's just make sure you remember that the initiate's a person, and you need to be able to be conscious of their feelings and their emotions, and you wouldn't want someone telling you all these negative things or things like that. So keep it positive and don't be nervous. Everyone's going to have to go through the meetings, so you'll get better as you do it. Is a big thing. It's just a learning process, and each meeting is going to make your next one even better and better.
Yeah, and I think the central piece of advice I would give is that it's okay not to be perfect. It's totally okay. We expect you not to be perfect. That's kind of the point of Phi Sigma Pi, is to help you become better at what you do in our brotherhood. So don't worry about, sometimes we get so concerned with like nailing it from the get-go and having it perfect throughout that we kind of miss the overall big picture. So don't worry about that. The big thing is, ask for help and get resources. If you are confused, or maybe you're like, our chapter's never done this, and this is something I want to do. It's your time. Whether you're the IA or just a brother in the chapter, this is your time in your chapter to take possession and ownership of this role. So if this is something you want to do, like I said, do it. If you have questions, you can reach out to your chapter consultant or the headquarters. You can email a member of council, and we can get you in touch with your chapter consultant, or ask campus professionals. I think the worst possible thing you can do is try to do it by yourself, or do nothing because you feel like you can't change anything. That's probably the worst thing, because you absolutely can. We see chapters every semester try something new and that they've never done it before, and align themselves with national practices and have great successes. So you definitely can. So ask for help. We're happy to help you. And we're all about, we want to meet the chapters where they are and kind of help you along the process, which is great. So we kind of talked about the mid-semester review a little bit. So now we're going to kind of move in to a little bit about the final voting. I know a lot of chapters have questions and apprehensiveness when it comes to final voting. I do see that we do have one question that kind of came through. It talks about, this semester our chapter is practically doubling in size, and there's a little bit of concern about, are the brothers okay with doubling, and are they getting to know the initiates? So what are some suggestions that you guys might have on how can we encourage our active initiate members to get to know the initiates, so that way when final voting comes, no one's voting an initiate down because they don't know that person per se?
Yeah, so this is something that I talk with brothers about all the time. It's actually a really, really popular conversation topic during visits and, just in everyday conversations with brothers. I always recommend that before initiate class meetings that the chapter have some sort of like initiate social hour where brothers can come in, and I know, coming from Gamma Psi, I know we had the first hour was social hour, and the second hour is where we learned about Phi Sigma Pi and the history and all the fun stuff. But the first social hour, basically, brothers would come in and plan like an icebreaker game. So we would do like Sporkle competitions, or like I don't know, bananagrams, different like fun icebreaker type activities. And brothers were actually able to get a like wild card credit for their attendance. So like, let's say you have like 2 in scholarship, 2 in fellowship, etc. Going to 2 initiate social hours counted as 1 wildcard credit. So that's kind of one way that my undergraduate chapter encouraged us to go to initiate meetings. Another thing too is, having, brother dates, interviews. Brothers, reach out to initiates if they haven't reached out to you too, and just introduce yourselves. I think, being in the initiation program is a very overwhelming and stressful time, and they don't know the brotherhood as well as we do. So just making sure that, we're getting out there and saying, hey, like, we voted you in at recruitment. We don't want to strand you for 6 weeks. We want to hang out with you and get to know you before induction, I think is very important, because there is a tendency that initiate classes can get very secluded from the brotherhood into their own class and not get very involved. And so that would be my recommendation, is just encouraging the brothers to have some sort of social hour, and also, you know, if they notice nobody's reached out to them yet, then the initiate probably doesn't know who they are either. So just making those connections and facilitating that a little bit.
I'd say along the same lines, at Gamma Mu, we require our brothers to meet with a certain percentage of the initiates, and the initiates to meet with a certain percentage of our brothers. So everyone isn't struggling to find dialogues, because we all have the same percentage that we have to meet with. So that's been something that helps us get to know them better and have ways of concrete pros and cons at final debate or midway that we can really have, like I said, concrete evidence of whether they'd make a good brother or not. We also have different events that we hold. The initiates have to hold different events for their class, so they hold like a fellowship event and a leadership event, and all of the brothers are invited to come, and a lot do, and the initiates also have to come to some of our events, so they get their time with bros, we call it, and those are just good ways to get to know your initiates and be able to relate with them and later use that information for debate.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think I would add, overall, it may sound very hardline, but personally, I feel voting on new members, that's a privilege of membership and not a right of your membership. And you should feel like that's a privilege that you have as a member of Phi Sigma Pi, that you get to bring in new members and share that with you. You know, I like a good party. I love having social events, and you know, if you think about some of the best parties you've probably gone to, those are the ones that you knew everyone at the party. If you've ever arrived late at a party at a stranger's house where you didn't know anyone, it's super uncomfortable, and maybe you don't talk to anyone. At least I do, because I'm like, well, no one's talking to me, so I don't need to talk to anyone else. That's how initiates can feel sometimes. You have to think about is, as brothers, we've been in the chapter longer. We know how the chapter runs. We know people's personalities already, and we're bringing all these new people in, and it's really our role and it's our privilege as brothers to teach them that. And so, you know, I think part of that is teaching that and changing that culture in the chapter. And also, you want to see your chapter grow and flourish and be there, and you want to be sure when you graduate you have a chapter to come back to. So you need to, you know, make sure that you're recruiting effectively. So I would say set expectations to brothers from the get-go as well. So just like we set expectations of the initiates, set those expectations of the brothers and say, you know, when it comes to final vote, our expectations, you're going to make an effort to get to know them as well. And then the second part of advice I would give you is, if we're in a situation where you're doing a final vote and we're noticing, you know, there's more cons about, well, I don't know this person, that's not really necessarily the best excuse not to vote someone into membership. And as brothers of Phi Sigma Pi within your chapter, you have the greatest power, and you have that right to stand up and say, this is not a valid reason. And I respect your opinion as my chapter brother, but in this situation, we need to kind of separate that and look at what are the qualities that this person brings. And sometimes you just have to trust your brothers. And so if you find yourself in a situation where that's not going to work, find some influential brothers in the chapter and make sure that they know the initiates too, and that they're comfortable with it. So that way, you know, if a brother can't come around because they work a lot, or maybe they have a lot of homework that semester, find a brother that's close to them that they feel comfortable with to vouch for that initiate. I think that helps a lot. So great question. I think we see that, especially this semester, we saw some immense chapter growth by far. So that's a great question.
In addition to that, Chris, as well, I have seen chapters start taking larger classes as well, and one thing that they've been utilizing are brother bios and initiate bios. So almost like making on their Google Drive like a scrapbook of sorts, a digital scrapbook, where brothers have like a picture, their year, their major, some fun facts, times that they're usually available for meals, and it's really helped increase bonding because people can go through and be like, oh wow, like I didn't know that brother was a finance major, like I'm a finance major, or I didn't know that they horseback rode in high school, like I did that, that's so cool. And so, you know, it kind of helps get the initiates started out on the right foot, because maybe the first people they reach out to are people who they share commonalities with, but also on the brothers' end too, they might be really excited to meet a certain person. So that's something that just like popped in my head that I wanted to make sure I mentioned as well.
That's an awesome idea. I think anytime, you know, and using technology, even if you're on campus and you can't get together. Tonight we're using Google Hangout, and there's 3 of us together, and I think you can get up to like 9 or 10 people on a Hangout. So if you need to get 5 or 6 initiates with a brother just to do a quick Hangout or whatnot, you guys are really smart people. We picked the best of the best in Phi Sigma Pi. I'm very adamant about that, and so I think a lot of times don't focus on the obstacle. Really get creative, and you'll find a way. I have full faith in our chapters that they can do that. So don't be afraid to be creative and find solutions to that. So great question. Do we have anything on Twitter right now before we go on to our next question?
Nothing on Twitter yet. That was our first question.
Awesome. So we're going to talk about final voting, and when that comes up, I know that sometimes that can be a very long meeting, depending on how that's structured. So let's kind of talk about what are some best ways to frame that discussion with the chapter going into final voting. When we talk about, how do we determine what's going to make a good member of Phi Sigma Pi? What are some ways that you might be able to frame that with your chapter?
At Gamma Mu, we really encourage to look at our characteristics of an ideal brother and what that means, and how the initiate is showing that they're going to be an ideal brother, or if they're showing they're not going to be so great in different areas. And we really only allow voting on those. Saying someone's a really awesome, would make a really awesome brother could be true, but it's not something that's tangible that you can see that they're going to do something with. So we really encourage just to vote from that. Our parliamentarian is in charge of bringing in sheets every debate, every midway and final vote with all the characteristics of an ideal brother, and then also with some different debate rules just to remind brothers. And that's what we do to encourage brothers to have positive or productive pros and cons. And another thing we do just to get more people to talk is we like to have like a competition to see how many different people we can get to talk in every election or in every debate. So we have our vice president keep a tally of when a brother speaks, if they with their roll number, just a tally by it to see how many brothers, if we can get all of them to talk at a meeting.
Wow, Emma, that's really cool. I think, a lot of chapters utilize the characteristics of an. So definitely you can locate that in the Resource Center, or please feel free to email me and I will send it to you. It's awesome. But at the same time, you can also, have your own set of standards as well. I know several chapters have like a slide that they put before their, initiates come up saying, hey, like let's just remember, like we're selecting for the such and such chapter. We're not selecting, our best friends or our roommates. So let's make sure we're having our like chapter think on or our group think on, thinking about what the chapter is missing. A lot of times what I hear is like, oh, every year we have such a hard time electing a fundraising chair or a webmaster. Think about those things too and look for that in recruitment, and also, for qualities in incoming, initiates and soon-to-be brothers. I think it's important to kind of make sure that you're doing your part in helping the chapter become more well-rounded and more diverse. Diversity is obviously something we pride ourselves on, and something that I'm super passionate about. So I think that's important too, is just thinking, okay, like it's okay if we all have different opinions. Like I'm sure chapters will tell you, I joke about this all the time, like if everybody in the room agreed with me during a wrap-up, I would be very freaked out. I would be, and I'm sure like in meeting too, like if everyone was like, yeah, like 100%, let's pass that amendment, or yes, we all think this person is super nice. Like, it would be kind of weird. Everyone would feel kind of a little bit awkward about that, and I think it's important to keep in mind that you are selecting for the chapter, and not everyone is going to be, big and little. So it's not you're choosing your little or your roommate. So chapter, I think, is probably my biggest point for voting.
Yeah. And I think the piece of advice I would give everyone is, before the meeting, make sure you have all your logistics planned out for this meeting. You go in prepared. So just to kind of quote the National Constitution, because I know it's everyone's favorite thing to read during spring break. So it talks about Phi Sigma Pi members in good standing may nominate qualified individuals to become collegiate or honorary members. So that kind of talks about, as a member in good standing, you can bring someone up for a vote for a bid or to be initiated. But when it talks about the logistics, it talks about voting shall be by ballot and shall be completed at least 48 hours prior to the scheduled ritual induction ceremony at a prior called meeting with quorum and with notice of voting on the meeting agenda. So just with that, just knowing that you have 48 hours prior to ritual, and it needs to be on the agenda. That needs to be communicated not only to brothers, but to initiates. Initiates need to know when they're being voted on and when induction is. That's vital. They need to know those things. So we can't just hold that from them. And then it talks about, no less than 48 hours notice shall be given. At least 3/4 of the vote of the active collegiate members in good standing present and eligible to vote are needed there. So just make sure, if you're not familiar with the National Constitution requirements, to familiarize yourself with them. And then another piece of advice I would give you is, if you're uncomfortable running the meeting, whether you're the president, IA, or brother at large, is you can use your campus resources. Members in your student activities office, like your student organization, if you go to them and say, would you mind coming into our chapter meeting in 2 weeks and facilitating the voting, they would be probably ecstatic to come in. So you have campus professionals that could come in and help guide you through that voting process. So great points. We did have a question that kind of come along. It does pertain to voting. We kind of talk about making sure we look at the characteristics of an ideal brother, and sometimes during final voting we can maybe feel that we're being mean or we're criticizing a person. So how do we kind of balance that when we're evaluating brothers, so that way brothers don't necessarily feel like they're being mean, but at the same time we ensure that we're being fair to the initiates and to the chapter to make sure that we're bringing in the most qualified members?
We just really stress to do business versus personal. So are your feelings personal? Are they things that are just against what you think or how you feel, or is it something that is going to affect the chapter, and it's something that's not going to be good for the chapter, or something that's going to be really great for the chapter? So we really just try and put aside your personal biases and think what's best for the chapter in all of our voting decisions, which is an easy thing to say and a harder thing to do. So sorry about that.
Yeah, and I think to Emma's point as well, just taking a minute before you go through with your con and working to phrase it in a way that's constructive, but also thinking to yourself before you voice your opinion, how is this con going to prevent this initiate from living up to the standards of an ideal brother? How is this specifically, going to make them not a great fit for us? I think that's probably one of the most important questions you need to ask yourself. I think, not voting in somebody just based on their personality is, obviously somewhat limiting. There are going to be people and going to be brothers for sure that have super big personalities. I can definitely turn mine on when I want to. And there are also going to be brothers as well who are somewhat introverted. So thinking like, oh, is this a person that maybe I just don't gel with? Maybe I'm, very science or type A and organized, and maybe they're very artsy and very different from me, and I just can't understand where they're coming from. And also, just understanding too that, like I mentioned before, not everybody is going to get along. It is great, and it would be awesome for everybody to like each other on the level as like a roommate, a best friend. And I think it's definitely something chapters should strive for, especially with, fellowship events and retreats. And I can get totally off topic with that, but I won't. But, thinking about that later on, like how am I going to make a bond with this individual once they're in the chapter? If they meet all the standards of an ideal brother, should I really be preventing them from something that they might be really good at?
Yeah, I think you guys kind of hit the nail on the head about, it's really about separating personal from, evaluating them from a membership standpoint. And, it's okay. Not every single person is a great fit for Phi Sigma Pi. And Phi Sigma Pi is not a great fit for every single person. And it's okay. Sometimes that, we have to part ways because of fit. But fit's one of those gray areas where fit is more of, you can't make it all the way to the final vote and probably realize someone's not a great fit. That's probably something we should have discovered a long time ago. So I think that's looking at more the root of like, well, why are we just now coming to this conclusion that this person's not a great fit for the fraternity after they've spent the last 5 to 6 weeks with us? So it kind of goes back to the whole point of the roundtable talking about this mid-semester review. That's where it comes in, because it really saves you heartache and the initiate heartache if it's about fit or other matters. Is that way you can say, okay, we had that discussion during mid-semester when we talked about this, and this is the progress they made, or maybe this is the progress that they didn't make. But I'm a firm believer that final votes, you shouldn't have that many surprises coming out at final votes if the chapter's been diligent and the initiates have also held up their requirements. The two pieces, last piece of advice I'd give is, like I said, it's okay that we don't have to have every single person join Phi Sigma Pi. I always like to say that we are a selective brotherhood, and we pick the best of the best that are going to journey with us. But just because we're a selective brotherhood, it doesn't mean that we're an elitist brotherhood, by no means. So that's the important part of having that culture of that it's okay to be selective, and we're selective based on our values. It's what we hold true. So whether that's looking at the tripod, we expect a higher caliber out of a member of Phi Sigma Pi, and that's when we look at fit. Are they upholding our values? Do they uphold what the ritual means, even though they haven't gone through it? But by no means are we an elitist group to separate ourselves. I don't think our founders ever imagined us to be an elitist group, and I definitely know our current brothers never have that to imagine in Phi Sigma Pi, and that's something we're really proud of, is our diversity. Our diversity of our brotherhood is probably the strongest attribute of Phi Sigma Pi as a whole. Logistically, it's setting the expectation that when you're doing voting, Sub Rosa is really taking over. So knowing and setting the expectation of what's said in that room stays in that room. And that kind of gives people a little bit more comfort if there's trust and respect that kind of formalize that. And if you find brothers are breaking Sub Rosa, then you need to use your judicial board within your chapter and hold them accountable. And that might sound mean, but it sets the culture within your chapter. So if you have that there, I think that helps. Does anyone else have anything they want to add before we move on to the next question?
Some things that I know chapters will do is they'll have their brother at large have either some sort of form where, I don't know if it's through like Facebook chat or text message, where if somebody truly feels so uncomfortable to the extent that they need it to be said because something happened that did make them feel uncomfortable, maybe it was after mid-review, that they're able to send that to the brother at large or chapter liaison and have them speak on their behalf. Obviously, it is a little bit concerning to have technology in meetings, so if that's not something that you guys feel comfortable about, maybe having just like a little note box that the brother at large can have in front of them, and if you take a recess or in between votes, you can just throw something in there. Also, too, if it's someone that you don't know or maybe you know very well, I've known people to step out during debate to make sure that, feelings aren't hurt. And so, keep those things in mind. But I think, as Chris and Emma have mentioned as well, it kind of goes back, to mid-vote, but also back to bid-vote. If we're going through the recruitment process and we're saying these are the people we've narrowed it down to that we feel comfortable giving entrance into the initiate program with the intent of them becoming brothers, then we have to remember that too. Like, if they were good then, what has changed since that point in time that is affecting your opinion, and kind of thinking about that, because the first vote is the most important vote. So I would just, encourage you guys to spend a lot of time during recruitment getting to know people. There's only so much that you can do, but events like speed dating or having one-on-one interviews, or however your chapter does it, really make sure the brothers get involved in that process. I know a lot of chapters have brothers can only participate in bid vote, or selection board is a lot of times what chapters call it, if they've been to a certain amount of recruitment events. And so that's something too that you can think about. But there's so many things to think about at every level. So if you guys ever have any questions at all or want to know how other chapters do it, obviously I'm here for you. So feel free to reach out. And if you do have another consultant too, this is a topic that we talk about with each other like all the time because we're super nerdy. So it's awesome. Yeah, feel free to reach out.
Great. And, I know we've referenced a lot. There's a document about the ideal characteristics of an ideal brother. That is in the Resource Center within the national website, or you can reach out to your chapter consultant, and they can get that. So kind of talk about what are some of the ideal characteristics of an ideal brother. Open it up to the panel. Could you guys maybe share a few of the top characteristics of what you feel an ideal brother would have?
I think some of the most important ones are devotion of time and energy. Did they put in the effort that was required of them for the process? I also think that ability to take responsibility from of your mistakes, and also to grow and learn is a big one, especially with the midway review. That's a time where you can give them any criticism you might have, as well as positives, and see if they are able to change, if they are able to grow. And that's a huge thing that we look for in a brother. I also think freedom of prejudices is an important one, just because we are such a diverse group. I think it's important to be able to accept everyone for their differences and for their similarities, and just have a positive attitude about it.
Yeah, along with what Emma said, the desire to serve, like if service is a really big, component to your chapter. I know a lot of chapters have local philanthropies. So, going through the list, I know there's several, ability to face adversity, making decisions, learning how to take criticism, concentrating under difficult conditions, so, being able to function in stressful circumstances, which, voting is definitely one of those situations sometimes. Yeah, and just maintaining a positive attitude. I think it would also be beneficial, too, for the chapter to just go through and, maybe even rank what is most important to them in that chapter, and having a team building event as a chapter. Because even sitting with all of your brothers, you may line up, and the one characteristic that they find number one may be 15 on someone else's list. So just really learning to appreciate how everyone is thinking and voting could also, be a huge benefit to the chapter.
Great. Yeah, I think those are all great examples. And one thing you might want to do is at the beginning of the term, if you're holding a recruitment workshop, is asking the brothers as a chapter, like, what are the characteristics of an ideal brother that we want here in our chapter, and keep that list, whether it's just like snapping a picture of it with your phone or writing it down. And when you have voting, put that list up. Put it up on the chapter wall and say, okay, these are things that we agreed on at the beginning of the term. These are things we want, and do these people have it? And when we go to those ideal characteristics, I think it's important to know that we're looking for those characteristics as either something the person already naturally has, or something they kind of develop through our initiation program. But the key is we can't force those characteristics on a person. So if it's able to overcome adversity, by no means does that mean that in our initiation programs we need to purposely be making situations that may feel adverse to see how they react to that. These are the qualities that they express to us through personal interaction above all. So I know the previous question, we kind of talked about, saying the logistics for the voting and having sub rosa, which is basically what's said in the room stays in the room, and confidentiality. So one of the questions we have is, what are some ways that you've seen either your chapter or other chapters instill a sense of sub rosa in the chapter, particularly around voting time?
Yeah, so this is a great point. I think sub rosa is very important, and there are definitely from chapter to chapter, different levels of how seriously sub rosa is taken in the chapter. I think the bottom line and the most important point with sub rosa is that if sub rosa isn't kept, a lot of trust is broken within the chapter. And if something hurtful is said and it's repeated, not only have you broken the trust with that brother, but then if somebody else finds out that sub rosa was broken, it may start to cause a divide in the chapter. So I would just talk about the ways in which sub rosa protects the chapter and protects individual brothers. I think it's kind of this just looming thing that kind of happens during voting and during meetings. Another thing to note too with sub rosa is that sub rosa doesn't apply to every single thing that you do as a brother. So if you're going to watch a movie night and something happens and somebody repeats a line in a movie or something silly happens, you don't have to not tell another brother who wasn't that event what happened. Like, oh, what movie did you watch? Oh, it's sub rosa. Reserve sub rosa for the times that, really call for the need for confidentiality, when you're using secret ballot or, voting on elections. Maybe you have a lot of people running for one position and one person gets it over another person. Thinking about, what good is going to come from me delivering this information to that individual who is outside of the room. And trust is the most important thing as brothers.
Yeah, going off of that, we just have, before every election or midway vote, we just have a beginning slide in our PowerPoint presentation of just a reminder of different things like sub rosa and how important it is for us to speak freely and to not have to worry about anyone's feelings getting hurt. So that's what we do.
Yeah, so I would say the first step is defining what sub rosa is, just like Christiana said, is defining that to the chapter and to the brothers to make sure they understand what that means. And it's all about trust. I'm a firm believer that a brother's word to one another is more powerful than any policy or bylaw that you can create. So I think sometimes it's natural for us as leaders of saying, we want to instill X into our chapter, so we have to create this bylaw or we have to create this policy or make a handbook, and people will do it. People don't necessarily follow that at first, so I think the most powerful tool you have in your chapter is your brothers and yourself. So if you're finding that, especially delicate situations where sub rosa is needed and that's being broken, then it's having the courage and the bravery to have that conversation with the brother and say, okay, this is the situation that happened and it's not appropriate and this is why, and I'm going to hold you accountable to follow through that we don't do this again. And then also having the courage to hold them accountable if it happens. And that's really how you change a culture and you make a movement within a chapter. It really only takes one brother to really move it, and others will follow. So great question regarding that. So we're about over with our time of the roundtable. We just have a couple more questions that we wanted to get in. One of the questions I wanted for us to talk about is, we talked about characteristics of ideal brothers, of people who we want to vote in. What about on the flip side? What are some good examples of where it would be appropriate for us possibly not to vote an initiate to be an initiated member into Phi Sigma Pi?
So this is something that I've had a ton of experience with. I think being a part of the social Greek system as well has brought a lot of knowledge my way about how about examples of brothers or sisters that we wouldn't want to consider. Especially what's going on right now with SAE at Oklahoma. There are just certain things that there are signs that lead towards that. Say you're at an event and somebody slips a racial slur, or say you're you know, 30 minutes late for a meeting and you're just not being respectful of a brother's time, you know, leaving all of the requirements until the last week, or, you know, just not taking the initiative and showing that they want to be there. So I would say, you know, it's definitely okay too to use the ideal characteristics of a brother and con based on those. So just saying, you know, hey, I really don't feel like this brother can maintain a positive attitude because they showed nothing but negativity in the past 3 encounters that I've had with them. And so using, you know, and that, you know, that's a pretty generic example, but using maybe something, you know, about adversity or, you know, diversity even, and saying, you know, hey, I really don't feel like this brother would be an asset, or this initiate would be an asset to our fraternity, based on, you know, a previous encounter I had with them in which they had a, you know, racial slur, and just, you know, taking, and making sure you address it with the initiate advisor too, like as we said prior. It's important that concerns are brought forward. Maybe, you know, we don't know how people were brought up, we don't know their backgrounds, like how they grew up, and we don't know what they knew, like they know is acceptable. So they may not have known that they offended someone. So giving them the opportunity to fix their behavior, but also kind of recognizing patterns of behavior, I think would go towards that topic for sure.
Yeah, I would also say just using the flip side of the ideal characteristics of a brother, using the opposites. I know one that we have like come across is this semester doing the midway reviews. If the initiate seems really receptive towards what you're saying and wants to change and wants to make a plan to do something, you could definitely say that is a pro and that they are good to change in adversity. But if they don't seem very receptive towards it and aren't really seeing how they offended someone and can't see both sides of a situation, that might be a time where you might be able to say, hey, you know, I don't think they'd be the best brother.
Yes, those are all great examples, and you know, I think it's again setting those expectations ahead of time of, you know, well, this person, you know, hit on my girlfriend in the student center. Probably not the best reason why you're going to vote someone down. So it's really, you know, taking a hard look, and you know, I always think of it as when I would vote on initiate is this someone I see that's going to graduate from Phi Sigma Pi in our university and be involved as an alum? And when I say be involved as an alum, I don't mean that they're going to be at every meeting and hold every alumni event, but are they going to be, you know, even joining an alumni Facebook group or answering an email or joining the National Alumni Association? Like, those are all ways and vital ways to be involved. I think one of the worst things we can do is initiate initiates that we know very well that are not going to meet the requirements of being a member in good standing and have to be expelled from the Brotherhood within a semester or two. We've kind of wasted their time and our time. So it's really taking a hard look of, you know, what are the requirements? Do we feel like these members are going to meet them? And also the last part is looking at, have they taken advantage of all the resources that they've been provided? So, you know, if we provide them all these things and they haven't taken advantage of those, that's a good sign. But if they've done everything, they've done the best with what they have, then that's great. We should applaud that and welcome them into our Brotherhood. Any other comments about voting?
I would just say, too, I know several chapters that include the characteristics of an ideal brother in their initiation handbooks. Give them a model to look after as well. You know, set the precedent right from the start, saying like, hey, like, we really want you to get to this place through our program. And if we're not providing you, you know, opportunities to do so, please let us know, because we want to make sure that you know, flourish and you kind of meet these standards and end up joining our fraternity and becoming an ideal brother. I've seen it more frequently than not after reviewing these past Form 110s. So many initiation handbooks that have included the characteristics of an ideal brother, which, you know, literally makes my heart melt. So keep doing it. But yeah, any resources that you can provide them, you know, like copy of the Greek alphabet, brother songs, fun things too. Give them all of that up front, and, you know, it'll make you guys seem more organized as well, but it'll make them take everything more seriously too, and just saying like, okay, wow, this is, you know, kind of what they're, you know, looking for, and I'll work towards that.
Awesome. And just remember to, make smart choices during recruitment when we're giving out our bids from the get-go. So if we're going to bid a very large initiate class, then we need to make sure all those initiates have the potential to be successful within our initiation programs. Which is a totally different topic for another night that we can talk about. We've just run up the hour. So at this point, I'm going to kind of turn it back to the panel. If there's a last moment advice that you want to give to everyone before we sign off for the night.
So I guess my last piece of advice would just be have fun with it. I think that, talking about voting and talking about mid-review and, nominating and bid vote and all of the, the details of the program can definitely get a little bit overwhelming. But I think, too, it is a super fun experience. Like, we love our initiates. Like, I know, like, when we got initiates, it was like Christmas came, or like, like it was like your birthday. It was like, oh my gosh, there's 12 of them, they're here. Or, I know some chapters are taking, 30 and 40 and up to 80. So there's so many cool things happening with the program, and I think, celebrate the successes. Make sure you're telling them what good they're doing. I know one chapter has during their meeting just like a period for initiate shout-outs where Brothers Biggs can talk about like what cool things their littles are doing. And just with mid-review, give them strengths and areas for improvement, and you should be fine. Those conversations typically go well, but if you are feeling unprepared, feel free to talk to me, and as Chris mentioned, feel free to go to the campus as well. There are plenty of resources that you can find on the campus, but of course we're always here to help you. So just ask.
So, Emma, do you have any final words that you'd like to share?
Yeah, just good luck to anyone who's nervous about the process. It's not a scary thing to do. Just remember you're talking to initiates who are hopefully going to be your brothers, so talk to them like they're your brothers, and you just want to help them grow and learn. So good luck, and you guys are all going to do great, I'm sure.
Awesome. Yeah, and just to echo, I would say, again, it's okay not to have all the answers and know that all the answers all the time, and it's definitely okay not to be perfect. You're not alone through the process. That you have plenty of resources on your campus, but also within the national fraternity. So don't be afraid to ask for help. I think that's the true sign of a great leader is when to ask and for help and take advantage of your resources. So that kind of brings us to the end of our roundtable. I thought this was a great roundtable. We had some great questions, so very excited about it. Just so you know, if you want to keep the conversation going on Twitter, you can use the hashtag PSP Roundtable. That's great. We're all pretty much on Twitter and can help you out with that. If you want to send questions to the national staff, you can always forward those to your region consultant. Or I believe the email is werock@phi.org, and we'll get that routed. Or if you don't know any other email, just email us at the National Council. Our emails are on the website, and we'll get you directed where you need to go as well. I do want to highlight, too, that there's a great blog post on the national website on mid-semester voting and things that we covered tonight. So we have a great blog, so take advantage of that. It's there for you. This recording will be available on the YouTube page of the National Fraternity as well, so if you need to go back and reference it, you can. So again, thank you to the panel. Thank you to everyone who kind of tuned in and watched, and we'll see you at the next roundtable. I believe that one's coming up in April, and will be involved around some alumni engagement with Vice President of Alumni Development, Ryan Alexander. So until then, we'll see you next time.